Elentila Lumenomenti Elvo. Welcome to Tolkien on Tap. I'm TJ. Grab a drink and enjoy. Almien.
Previously on Tolkien on Tap, have you ever wondered about Gil-Galad's true parentage?
What other theories do we like? So Andreth and Egg.
Not just a random ass elf, like a random ass elf who like was a thrall that like wasn't trusted by the other elves once he
That is
like
one that I
left.
like. Rusingon baby ? Gay agenda.
I do like the Count of Monte Cristo one.
Let's explore these theories and many more tonight on Tolkien on Tap. All right, where were we?
I mean, we were on a tangent, but we can go back to this if you want.
Yeah, let's finish this up.
Let's finish making our list of yes possibilities. So
Okay.
we got Andreth and Egg, son of some fucking guy. Asindar, possibly Eluded or Elurin. Oh yeah, you had mentioned like, oh, but what about the mortality thing? My thing is, okay, the way like child having in like the Legendarium works is like you put your spirit into them, right? Essentially. So you have these two orphaned little boys.
Mm-hmm.
If they were adopted by elves and like they're like spirit Feod, is that how you say spirit? Whatever.
Well, it depends on if it's more than one or not, but yes.
Yeah, Feod, whatever. If it was supported by elves, could that essentially like help alter like the essence of their souls? Also, what if
That's an interesting theory.
Maitros did find them?
Oh, damn it, you said that.
And help raise them.
Let's go back to the Elurin and Elurin.
That just popped into my head.
Let's go back to the Elurin and Elurin thing, and the Fea, of whatever elf would have raised them, because as far as I'm aware, and David, correct me if I'm wrong, isn't it when you create something you pour part of yourself into it, not just when you raise it? Because like it doesn't say anything about, and this is just like my interpretation, and I could be 100% wrong, but
so what you're alluding to, Bree, is kind of like, what if all the Noldor, to make themselves a high king, they kind of did a spirit bomb?
I mean,
part of their will.
I haven't figured that part yet. But my point was, if Eluded and Erurin were lost and alone in the woods, and they were rescued by an elf, and they had lost their parents, they're very, very young, they have no one to nurture them, and they were dying essentially. And let's say you found you're an elf, you're a healer, you find these little babies dying, in the snow, and you have to give them like part of your life force in order to bring them back to life. Like, I feel like their brush with mortality of like almost dying, and also just like their lineage, I feel like that would make it so that their status as, elf or man is much more fluid than if they had been raised by Dior and Nimloth.
So
I don't
the
know.
thing is, I would argue that kind of what TJ was alluding to, as far as, because elves and men are naturally incarnate beings, being that they have to have the Fea, they have to have the Hroa, it is only in the creation of like that's something with their hands that they can pour like that will to, not because it can like extend the life of them, just that it's like their will and ability, versus say someone like Meliana, as far as her tying herself to an incarnate form in order to have Luthien, I think would be something different.
Well, it doesn't even stop at what you were saying, because like you look at Morgoth, and Morgoth's ring is
he gets stuck in his incarnate form, right?
I'm sorry?
He gets stuck in his incarnate form after like contact with the
because he pours
right?
so much of himself into Arda, which he had a part in creating. He didn't create the whole thing. He had a part in creating, and he had obviously a huge part in the marring of it. And then you look at Sauron with the ring, with the One Ring specifically. like huge part of his essence goes into that. And that's all through the act of creating the thing. And that's a huge theme in Tolkien in general, is not just that like you make a thing and like, yeah, it's part of because I put a little bit of myself into it, like I poured, how like in the real world colloquially people go like, I poured so much of myself into this. Whereas like in Tolkien, it's like you pour yourself into something because like you literally pouring part of your essence into it. So as far as Elurade and Elurin being able to exist beyond the realm of mortality, for lack of a better word, I don't like using the same word twice, but it's a cool theory, but realistically within the rules that Tolkien set up, it doesn't make sense.
But hear me out.
Because then also, because also wouldn't Iconara have done that with Andressa though?
Because
what do you mean?
Because if he could extend part of his own immortality,
I see,
to someone he loves, then he could have done that to Andressa, and that would have solved.
Well, but maybe they didn't know. But also, Eludin and Elurin being part Maiar, like that also alters everything. Also, does it make a difference who carries the children? So Nimloth, she's fully an elf. She's the one who gives birth to the children.
It does actually. It does matter who carries the children.
So then it's like, a lot of people assume that like
I believe
Elurin and Elwing would have been mortal because Dior was presumably mortal, but also like I think that like we just don't have enough data when it comes to half elf.
I gotta back up what I said. I have to back up what I said. Or not back up like bolster, but like back up. I have to pull back what I said. It does not matter who carried the children, because think of Beren and Luthien, right?
So yeah, but she was mortal when she bore Dior.
But that's what I'm saying, is like it matters where they are at the point in which the bearing happens.
Right, but Nimloth was not mortal. She's an elf. She's fully an elf.
So then you have to look at Elrond and Celebrian.
Right,
because Celebrian is full. Elrond is not. Celebrian bears the children, and all the children get the choice.
They get the choice because Eonwe gave it to them. Because the Valar specifically gave the choice to Elrond and Elros. So if we're talking about half elves prior to them, then what determines what they are? So they get the choice specifically.
So that's a really good question.
We don't know enough about half elves. There's so many contingencies that come up. Sorry, go ahead.
No, I would say I agree to a certain extent, but I would argue, I would lean towards the side of the fact that they are described in, I mean, to be honest, like they kind of get unalived before you get a chance for immortality. So I think I would argue that Dior definitely was still human, because that informs Elwes and Dikulo, fuck Elwes and Dikulo. Because his heir and Baron being kind of why his heart gets softened towards men.
But I mean, he did, like, is there any way to fully know? Because the only like direct data we have on what happens to the half elven is when the Valar directly intervene. We don't really have an understanding of what happens to half elven.
That's not true. No, because Dior, the Valar don't introduce.
But he dies before it becomes relevant. Like he dies super young.
No, because because Luthien shows mortality. Listen, I'm gonna hold on. I'm gonna back this up a little bit. So let's look at just Beren and Luthien, right? Like besides the Mandos effect, Luthien chose to give up her immortality. I made a video about this, and just for it was annoying. Like if you don't like love, because it was for my partner. It's about I fucking said that and I lost my train of thought.
Talking about the choice of mortality for Luthien.
Thank you. So Luthien chose to give up her immortality, and the way that most people look at that story with Beren and Luthien, excuse me, is that she's giving up her life eternal with her family that is already here in Arda, right? What they miss is that she also gains a gift when she gives up her immortality. The gift of man, the gift of Ilúvatar is death. So she gains, she loses life eternal in Arda, but she gains life eternal in Ilúvatar, which Beren also gets to enjoy. So they have this everlasting love that, like, no matter what, lives on for fucking ever, right? Where was I going after that? Is the question.
No, I think we can.
Oh, with Dior, right? So the thing is, we know that an elf gives up their immortality initially. This is prior to Elrond and Elros. When an elf gives up their immortality, that means they are tied to the fate of man.
Right.
Luthien did that prior to giving birth, which means her children are tied to the fate of men. They are essentially, and I know there's loopholes, and I'm sure there's going to be an argument in just a minute about this, but they are effectively the race of man. Yes, they've got the blood of the Maiar, the blood of the Eldar, and the blood of the God damn, David, help me.
The Vanyar, the Noldor, the Maiar.
No, the race of men. The race of men.
Oh, the race of men.
The Atani?
The Edain?
Edain.
There you go.
How the fuck? I'm the worst fucking Tolkien person ever.
So
they have so they've got the blood of the Maiar, the blood of the Eldar, and the blood of the Edain, right? But because of the choice of Dior's mother, that affects Dior personally.
Okay.
Because had she not chosen yet, then I can see an argument. But she had already chosen. And it's like with Tolkien being a religious man, and I'm not saying, like, I'm not trying to pull the well, he's Catholic and this is how the Catholics believe, but there are certain threads that he does weave into his stories.
Yeah.
And the choices of the parent affect the choices of the child. So that's where it leads me to believe his intention was for Dior to be mortal.
Okay. But that doesn't say anything about Dior's kids, because Nimloth is fully an elf.
I think the
Dior
point he's
is
making...
not is the thing. Dior is not even effectively. Dior is mortal, which means Nimloth being an elf and Dior being a human, yes, with a bunch of different blood strains, doesn't matter. Dior shares the fate of man. It's the exact same story as his mother and father.
Right, but not his kids.
No, but I think what he's TJ's kind of, but I think what your point as far as like kind of taking the example from the Catholic perspective, as far as like, oh, like, why is it a virgin birth? Why can't Joseph, be like the biological father? As far as like, the spreading of, say, in Tolkien's case, the fate of man is spread through the seed of Dior, him being immortal. So that would spread down to his other kids. If we're going that way, I would also argue separately from that there seems to be, given like the Quiviarna, as far as the elf counting myth, that there is a set number of elves that are to be in existence. Just like
144?
144, but also like how, just kind of the example that we get with Tuor. Tuor replaces Luthien as far as the number of elves that are to exist. Right. And so I think I would believe that within the elves, there's that whatever set number, whereas within mortal men, it is far more expansive and far less set, so to speak. But where when the half-elven would be is a half-elven that aren't of the special group of Erendil and Elwing's kids and their descendants, or the grandchildren, I should say.
Right. Well, because it is only Erendil. I'm sorry. Go ahead, David.
They automatically just get counted amongst men because that's the more numerous group.
And it is only Earendil and Elwing's children and their line that get a choice.
Yeah, of the Elven's side.
Well,
consider two things. Oh, sorry. Consider two things. One, we don't know if the limited, like Tur taking Luthien place is a theological reality, or if it's a way that the Elven theologians tried to make sense of Tur being allowed to stay on Amon.
Yeah,
right? Like it could have been like, okay, we know that men have to have the gift of men. They cannot live indefinitely on Amon, but we have this guy who's here. How do we make sense of this? Oh, hey, we lost this elf. There you go, basic math. But like, and also, so like, we don't know if that is like actually like a theological truth, or if it's just the way that that particular writer made sense of that really bizarre choice that was probably made by Ilúvatar. Also, I think that
that's a good point.
When we talk about the fate of the half elven, it feels like every time like that kind of thing comes up, the Valar, it's because the Valar come in and they like rules lawyer it. They're constantly changing the rules of what it means to be half elven. So it's like so uncertain. So like with Eludin, who like presumably died very young, we don't see their death. We just know that they disappear, which leaves a huge question mark. We don't know how the Valar either interacted with them or would have interacted with them. We also don't know how the Valar might have eventually interacted with Beor, because they're constantly changing the rules.
No, they're not. It's Ilúvatar that is.
They're like, you get a choice. You don't get a choice.
No. It's not them. It's Ilúvatar. The Valar are playing in the Ilúvatar sandbox.
See, okay. I'm gonna push back against that, because I like this. I talked about this with Lee the other day, and I feel like this is a whole nother episode, which is why do the Valar seem to fundamentally not understand the children of Ilúvatar, right? Like trying to control them, not allow. It's because, to me, theologically speaking, you know, I think that like people often talk about like Tolkien being inspired by Christianity, Catholicism. I think that in terms of like Ilúvatar and the Valar, it's much closer to Taoism, where you have like the one, you have the Tao, and then you have various deities who embody different aspects of the one, right? And that's what they talk about like in the Silmarillion, right? Where each of the Valar embody different aspects of Ilúvatar, and Ilúvatar tells them like, you also, to fully understand me, you also have to look for the spark that's within my children also. But you have Melkor, right? Who to me kind of comes across as the Valar of like change and transformation and chaos. So what do you do?
Yes, he's the Valar of chaos. I'm so glad you said that.
When such a large aspect, because he is one of the most powerful Valar, when such a large aspect of who Ilúvatar is as a person leaves the fold, right? So the deity embodying change, transformation, chaos, he leaves. And then the Valar are left, this pantheon that fundamentally is now incapable of understanding change and transformation, because they lost that core component of Ilúvatar.
Such a good point. That's such a good point.
So to me, I think that's why the Valar struggle so much with like, because, you know, even when in terms of like when we talk about marriage, right, where the Valar are married, to them it's not even like so much a romantic
that's a marriage. That's a marriage that's to me, married in that sense is not the way we view.
Yeah, exactly. They are two sides of the one thing, right?
And also, yes, exactly. Yavanna and
they are the full earth. You have nature and earth. So to them, when they see, for example, elves getting married, they think, okay, we have our thing, they're replicating us. So that means that they're two halves of one whole, right? That's why they cannot comprehend the idea of Finwë loving both Muriel and Indis, right?
Well, and also you brought up a really good point about Melkor. I can't remember exactly how you just presented it, but
the change, that aspect of change,
the chaos of Melkor is something that when Melkor is gone, this is what you did. When Melkor is gone, the other Valar don't know what to do, which is 100% correct, because Melkor. I'm sorry.
Ulmo is the only. I would say I would say he would fit
Does
more
Ulmo
the...
actually know what to do though without Melkor? Because like, what happens? What is Melkor?
I mean, so because I would counter that by saying that Ulmo is in touch with the music of the Ainur, and I think he would fit too with an aspect of like a, as oxymoronic as it would sound, like type of controlled chaos. The waters and the sea being an ancient form of chaos.
Especially when you talk about Ose, who is a Maiar of Ulmo, who lives in both of those worlds.
Yeah.
You know, you have, so when we talk about marriage, it's like these two, like when it comes to the Valar and the Maiar, they symbolize one aspect of a whole, right? They're not really married. They're just like two sides. So you have death and fate, you know, Vaida and Namo, right? And that's kind of their understanding of what it means to be.
Did you just say Vaire and Namo instead of Mandos?
Mando,
appreciate
sorry.
you. No. That's his name.
I got it
You're
right.
one of the few people who would do that, and I wanted to point it out, like how much I appreciate you saying his actual name as stated in the text. I'm sorry to interrupted.
Here's my life hack of like getting the names correctly and all that. Just read a lot of fan fiction. Literally, that's it. That's why I know his actual name. That's why I know all
I'm just
of these
trying
people.
to like give you some big ups because like there's so few people who would just straight up call him Namo, because Mandos is his falls. So I was just trying to like build you up a bit. That's all.
Thank you. But yeah. So you have like, but I think also like if you look at the Valar, like they do not understand true transformational fundamental change, because even within, like, for example, you have the seasons, Yavanna, right? The seasons are cyclical. They come back. Or even with Aule, you know, like we see these like massive transformations in geology, but it's a rock cycle. It's still a cycle, right? Like,
well, even to your point about Yavanna, they talk about the two trees that she helped to create, and how like every every 14 hours one wanes while the other waxes.
Yes.
You know, so like even within the text, what you're saying is like whole cloth, like this is how it is.
Yeah, so to them, that's how they see all of Arda. That's how they see the universe. And that's why whenever they try to make sense of like the choices that the children of Ilúvatar make, they can't understand it, because presumably the children of Ilúvatar, we would have very little tiny pieces that represent Ilúvatar, right? We have all of the Valar within us, at least a little bit. So that means we have the spark of Melkor within us as well, but the Valar don't have that anymore. So we have the capability to have transformational true change. And you can argue with Ulmo, because Ose worked for Melkor for a while, still has that spark, whereas the rest of the Valar don't, which is why, again, they're like, what? You mean elves are fucking humans? We can't believe that could ever happen, because to them, that's not in their nature. So why would it be in the nature of anyone else?
Yeah, let me go back a little bit, because you hit on something that I think that like there's a Tolkien creator on TikTok, and she gets a lot of shit because like she's like a quote unquote Melkor stan, but the way you just interpreted everything makes so much sense and actually like bolsters her point to it. Like, there's things where like even I do it where, we push the envelope about like how ridiculous things get. But if we think about the Valar, right? There's like no bad about the Ainur except for like Melkor and Sauron and the Valeraukar, right? Like there's a subset, but generally when we talk about the Ainur, it even says in the Silmarillion like Melkor's not counted anymore, right?
Exactly.
But the thing is, you brought up something earlier, Bree, about how, and you said it as a quick aside, and you just kept moving.
That sounds like me.
No, but like it was a really important point about how there's this chaos that we kind of need, and Melkor was that chaos we kind of need, because I can't remember how you worded it, but basically like without that like shit, that bullshit that's going on, you don't recognize this light that is happening right in front of you. It's a very yin and yang conversation, but it's a living yin and yang. It's not like like most people like seeing it. It's a pictorial yin and yang. It doesn't move. There's no nuance to it.
I would argue no. I think if you study like Taoism, like yin and yang is like very like different from I think like the conception that a lot of people have. But with Melkor, I think the thing with Melkor is he left that role as being like the transformational, like what's the word I'm looking for? Catalyst of the Valar. He left that role and he ends up becoming chaos that is like ungrounded, right? Because again, the Valar are meant to represent various aspects of Ilúvatar. So
I would say that Melkor might be the most important of the Valar.
He should have been, but because
I think he is.
I disagree, just because I think like as much as the Valar need him to understand change, he needs them to understand the rest of the song and to understand, like, that's why his approach to like ruling Arda is so fundamentally like flawed and inherently destructive, right? Where like he has to subjugate people to his will via Sauron. He has to like decimate the ecosystem.
He doesn't subjugate Sauron up front. He seduces
I'm not saying he subjugates Sauron. I'm saying he's subjugating the citizens of Middle Earth. Like Sauron is his lieutenant who helps with that subjugation. Right. No. I think that's a whole nother conversation. But for me, I think it's like they need each other. So Melkor no longer can embody that role that he was meant to have as like transformation, as like being the catalyst, because it's like how do I put this? Like imagine like these gears spinning, all working together, and then you have one gear that fucks off. These gears get stuck like in a loop, and then the gear over here just like spins uncontrollably and spins out.
So as far as this Melkor thing and the gear analogy, right? The gear analogy works if there isn't Ilúvatar.
Yes and no.
But the thing that like loses me with the gear analogy is the gears are made by a creator, right? And put together in the correct order. And then somehow we're saying that Melkor, as a gear in this clock, we're gonna just go with this analogy. Melkor, as a gear in this clock, somehow stops working. Why would that be? Because fucking Eru Ilúvatar created this gear that way. I'm not gonna stand Melkor. I'm not gonna like call him daddy and all that stuff. Like everybody else wants to. That's fair. I'm not gonna kink shame. You do you. But when we're talking specifically about like the gears of the world moving to move life down this path or whatever, if you place gears in a clock, if you're a clockmaker, you place a gear in a clock that does not fit, and every once in a while will create discord or make your clock move in a frantic or weird way, like that is your fault. That is not the gear's fault.
But then you're just stretching the analogy, which
let me alter the analogy. I think
because I would say that analogies aren't supposed to be direct one-to-ones. Like there's usually more like discontinuity between continuity with analogies. So to take the clock or the gear image and to stretch it that far is beyond just the point that's being made. I would add that the whole aspect with the Ilúvatar is the aspect of free will. We know Tolkien's whole concept of his literature is like being anti-domination and force, and so for Ilúvatar to say like, nope, this is it, like just cut you off right there, that would be against like to alter that free will of Melkor, what he's going about. And again, you're ultimately going to encounter the problem and question of the Odyssey. If Ilúvatar is all good and all powerful, why does evil happen? Like you're gonna that's what you're eventually gonna run into.
Discourse that this creates. Don't think about like there are other ways to look at things. Like I was bringing up the gear analogy specifically because when we talk about Eru Ilúvatar, I'm sorry.
It fits into like the theology of like the clockmaker, which is like one of the like
the blind watchmaker.
And I wish I had picked a different analogy. Now thinking about it, I think a better one would be with ecology, right? Like you have like an ecosystem and you have a keystone species, and without that species, that ecosystem falls apart, right? Like because it's
sharks.
So let's take mistletoe, for instance. It can be super important to an ecosystem, where you have like it can provide food for birds. It can exist in to a certain extent. I have this on the mind because I went up to the San Gabriel Mountains today and I saw a lot of oak mistletoe, or like what was I going to say? And it can exist in like harmony with the rest of the ecosystem. However, when the ecosystem is altered because of like feedback loops and all of those things, that species can become noxious. Like it can become dangerous, or even if you put it in a different context, right? So right now in Southern California, we have a big problem with black mustard, which is not native to our ecosystem. In its ecosystem, it's really important, really great. When it comes here, it destroys everything. So I think that's what I mean with Melkor. Outside of the context of his ecosystem that should be flourishing with him in it, he becomes noxious and invasive. You know, he becomes, mint. If you're a gardener and you plant mint outside of like a pot, it will take over everything, like, and kill everything. It's very invasive. Same thing with like so many, like even like in ecosystems, poison oak is a keystone species to the chaparral ecosystem here. It's considered a noxious weed to a lot of people, and in different contexts it can be harmful, but without it the ecosystem could fall apart. So I think that's my point, is like Melkor within the ecosystem of the Valar that was meant to be, he's like a keystone of that ecosystem. When he leaves that ecosystem, he's noxious, invasive, destructive. And then meanwhile, this ecosystem that he was supposed to be a core part of is much less rich. Like it technically survives, but it is not thriving the way it was meant to. So I think to me, that's how I see the Valar and the leaving of Melkor.
I really like that comparison, because then it's like, it's basically the golden mean. You don't want it invasive, you don't want it extinct type of thing. It has its purpose, but when its purpose goes overboard, it becomes
if it's placed in a completely different context, right?
Yeah.
So like there's so many like endemic species that like, right now we have a big bark beetle problem with the like pine trees up there, up like the ponderosa pines. Like they're completely decimating the ecosystem. And then when climate change happens, climate change makes the ecosystem more favorable for these beetles, but also the way that our pine trees fight these bark beetles is, sorry, I'm going on a crazy tangent. They emit sap, like the amber that catches the bugs in Jurassic Park. So the sap will get the bark beetles and kill them. However, the way that the trees here, these pine trees create sap is with water. What happens when there's a drought? They don't have enough water to kill these bark beetles. Meanwhile, because of the heat, the bark beetles are continuing to multiply because it's better for them. So it becomes this really vicious feedback loop and unbalanced. And I think that that's the nature of Arda Mard.
Let me pull in some Jurassic Park though, because the way in which you were speaking of the ecology of California and the fear, not necessarily, I don't know if it is actually fear, but for lack of a better term, reminds me of a speech by Ian Malcolm in Jurassic Park, and I can't quote it verbatim, but they're worried about the dinosaurs taking over the world and destroying it for humans. And Ian Malcolm, in a morphine-induced in a morphine-induced haze, is lucid enough to say this planet has survived far longer than humans have existed. It will exist without us. So it sucks when things like that happen with the bark beetles, but the planet does will that shit out. And I wish it didn't affect people, because like I don't want to see anyone get, their home destroyed or lose memories or any of that shit. But like,
but you're also talking about,
it all ties back to like all this other fucking shit that's happening for like 40 years, where like our Congress has just fucked our planet over.
Yeah, well, that's the problem with, oh my God, we're going on a climate change tangent. It's because our climate runs on a positive feedback loop, right? Kind of like air conditioning. So, for instance, yes, if we lose humans, the Earth might serve, like there's kind of this idea of like, well, the Earth will recalibrate. However, with these feedback loops, if they feed into each other enough, it will collapse. Like, for instance, the reason why the fires here were so intense right now is because of climate change. The the ice caps are melting up in the Arctic.
Mm-hmm.
Dark colors absorb heat, light colors reflect it. The ice it's called albedo, it would reflect the heat back into the ecosystem. You have less ice, you have more ocean. The ocean starts to absorb more heat, which melts the ice more quickly, but also warm air rises, cold air sinks. So the warmth from the ocean causes a low pressure. And then so we have like the Arctic vortex up here, which controlled our whole climate. But when you mess with the pressure up there, it literally changes the shape of the Gulf Stream, which is why we have these crazy fires and why we're having a drought. So it's just like, wow,
not just that, Bree.
What the fuck?
Not just that, Bree. So for the listeners or the watchers, David and Bree are on the West Coast. I am in the Midwest. So they're experiencing crazy ass fires when it's like winterish time here. We experience like crazy. David, let's you don't have to throw down you don't have to throw up the gang sign.
Caliquendi.
Yeah, Caliquendi.
Caliquendi, that's so cute.
Right. In the Midwest, what happens is during the winter months, and it doesn't happen all the time, like it happens in California with your fires, unfortunately. So we're a little bit more lucky with this, but there are times where like we get crazy ass fucking snows where like and freezes. There was so 2019 time of recording. This is 2025. Okay, 6 years ago in the Chicagoland area, it was colder than the fucking Arctic Circle for 2 fucking days.
Yes. So this is the American continent. You have like the polar vortex. So our Gulf Stream is used like during the winter, it's supposed to be like this.
Yep.
Now this thing, it like hooked it up, and now we're in the Mediterranean climates. We have cold winter. We have wet winters, dry summers. You guys have the opposite. You have dry winters, wet summers. But instead of the rain that was supposed to come here, like in December, it got moved here and it got taken to you guys because you guys have like naturally colder winters.
So the natural jet stream, the natural jet stream. So I don't know where it goes on the West Coast, but like around here, it goes like down through like Minnesota, Wisconsin, and then it like hooks back up like just past Chicago. So like all the cold shit goes straight the fuck to Chicago, and I live right the fuck southeast of Chicago. So yeah, when it's fucking shitty in Chicago, it's shitty for me, which sucks. Luckily I don't have to deal with fires. Like there's tornado, like I've the last 2 weeks I've had 3 fucking tornado alarms go off on my phone.
Crazy because you guys are supposed to get tornadoes in like the late summer, early fall. Not fucking March and February.
And this is what, like, it's all out of whack. Exactly. And this is why like people who go like, oh, climate change isn't real, motherfucker. Climate change doesn't mean like, because they'll fall back in global warming. Whoa, this isn't global warming, motherfucker. It's called climate change, and it means that like things happen at the same, like things still happen the way they used to happen, but in different parts of the world at different times than they historically have.
Global warming because the average global temperature of the ocean is rising. So it's like collectively, like it's not like
right, but they'll disingenuously.
I know people. I did not mean to turn this into a climate change.
No, it doesn't.
We're talking about Gil-Galad.
Welcome to Tolkien on Tap, where we get fucking drunk and we just talk about things that we're passionate about.
Well, here's the problem: you get me drunk, and I will start talking about how amazing the Mediterranean chaparral ecotone is. Like I'm a sicko. I love it here so much. Today we went out and we saw it's a canyon live oak, which is like an oak that's like indigenous to this area. It is like I literally cannot reveal the exact location of this because I have to gatekeep it. But no, because people vandalize it. But it's ancient.
Oh, shit.
It's close to 1,000 years old. And I got to see it in person. I got to touch her. It was amazing. I almost cried.
Nice.
But
Wait,
for sure.
Did you call it her? Is it Fimbrethil?
Honestly, she did have Timbrathil vibes.
Okay.
I don't know. I feel like I resort to that being like my neutral pronoun for non-human living things. Like I just call everything she because I feel weird calling things it. Like if that's my friend, I don't want to call it it.
That's fair. I do the exact same thing actually, Bree.
But yeah, I feel like we could have a whole episode about the nature of Melkor and like.
I thought you were gonna say the nature of Middle Earth, and I was like, hold on, let me get the book.
We could have the literal nature of Middle Earth. Also, I have a lot of thoughts about Tolkien and animism, just like as a concept. Like, oh my god.
Do you follow Eric Jampa?
No, who is that?
He's a
you need to follow
Tolkien
him.
scholar on TikTok.
You
would
ERIKJAMPA. Anderson.
He's a Tibetologist. He used to be and here it's a Tibetan Buddhism, if I recall correctly.
Eric Jampa Anderson.
He's no longer an adherent, but he's still like has like studies and researches and all that. But he wrote a paper for a Tolkien conference in November, I want to say, or August, I forget which one, where he did basically Tom Bombadil and Vannamunen from or whatever, however you pronounce his name, from the Kalevala in regards to I think animism or shamanism, but he's heavily
go hand in hand.
Yeah.
So Eric is an incredibly sweet human being. He's very knowledgeable. He's a queer creator.
Oh my gosh! How did I not have? It's crazy that I didn't know about because like queer Tolkien animism is like. Yeah. But I think that's the thing. Like these are all things I have rotating in my brain literally all the time, but I don't really talk about them that much. So I don't know that other people also are rotating these things in their brains.
You should watch Eric's stuff because Eric's very good at his long form stuff.
Ooh, I love a long form thing.
Well, he's good at like his like short long form stuff, like the like longer videos on TikTok.
Yeah.
That's what I'm talking about. Like, because YouTube, like most YouTube stuff is like over like 15 minutes generally. Like that does like very low.
Yeah.
Yeah, but Eric's stuff is like generally like TikTok adjacent, and it's about like 5 to 10 minutes, and he's very succinct in what he speaks about. I reached out to Eric 3 or 4 months ago, asked him about queer creators, because he is himself a queer creator, and he's absolutely one of the sweetest fucking people I've ever met. Because he didn't know me, and I was like, hey, by the way, I'm like closeted trans, and I'm like trying to like find. Actually, I was trying to research for your episode, Bree.
Yeah.
And I reached out to Eric, and he goes, "Oh, check these things out." Yeah.
Honestly, I'm so touched that you researched so much for my episode.
I tried. There's things I don't understand and don't know how to access. There's also things that just don't like appeal to me, but like I was really trying to like find some sort of common ground.
Yeah.
Because like I didn't know, and I had to figure like I've hidden a lot of like who I am for a long time, and I was like, all right, so Bree's very open, and Bree wants to be on the show, so I should probably just say fuck it and figure this shit out.
Yeah. That makes sense. But
yeah,
I'm open online and even with my friends, but I live with my parents. I'm closeted. Like, but I
saw your fucking post about that, and I was like, I did not know that.
Yeah, I'm constantly living, but I'm used to it. It's fine, and I don't mind it. But what I was saying is like you bring your own experiences as a queer, like the things that you brought up, like in our discussion, like it was inside of you from your own experiences. Like it's about you. Like you bring your experiences, your knowledge, your like your own they call it like in what's it called? In, like emancipatory education, your own funds of knowledge, right? Like just from your lived experience as a queer person, and just like from your heart. Like I feel like there comes a point where you're like, you hear something and you're like, yeah, that's something that I know. Maybe I don't have the words for, but that's me and I know it. And you don't, like you were totally prepared for the episode to talk about queer stuff because you are trans and queer. Like That's you. You brought yourself. That's what matters.
I've been emotional as fuck since that episode, by the way.
Valuable. Me too. I think about it often. Like that. Oh my god, I'm excited for people to watch/hear it.
Because you haven't dropped that one, have you yet?
No.
Okay.
Also, while we're on this,
I'm looking forward to that.
I'm sorry, David.
I said I'm looking forward to that.
Oh yeah, yeah. Bree brought up some really Bree and Lee fucking like just have some of the coolest fucking ideas and like headcanons and like things that I would never have thought about because I'm very rigid about like how I experience story, and they are not. They're very flexible in how they experience story. So like it was really cool to experience their understanding of things versus mine. And Bree was very they facilitated me they were very facilitating in because I would get like excited about something. I'd be like, wait, really? And Bree would be like, yeah, absolutely. Like just like, yeah, we're here. Like, let's talk about it. It was really, really, really cool. And I learned a lot about myself in that episode, actually.
Why dialogue is so important. Paulo Freire talks about like true learning only happens.
Yeah. You brought that.
We learn from each other. We talk, and then we construct reality and knowledge together.
Yeah.
Yep.
You brought that up during that episode.
Did I? I took literally all I need is like one sip of wine, and I'm like out here talking about Paulo Freire, like relatively about my man and pedagogy.
Wait, so no, I was about to say you go to the pedagogy of the oppressed and
like
with Tolkien. I need that.
I can. So my master's program was pretty much completely based in like Freudian thinking. So that's like my guy.
Oh, nice.
I love him. Would die for Freire.
You guys are all so fucking smart. I don't know how the fuck I stumbled into this shit. You guys are so fucking
you're likable and smart and interesting,
and because you want to learn. You're kind and you
we are all here.
No, I'm just a dork who's loud and charismatic somehow. Here's
a life hack. Successful people in academia are just charismatic dorks. That's it. There's no.
I did just listen to Teaching with Magic with Corey Olson. For those who are listening, Teaching with Magic is Elise Cedeno, who has her own podcast, who was on my podcast. And she went to Signum, similar to Kelly from the middle page. But Elise had Corey on, and they were talking about this a very similar topic to this. And I lost my train of thought in the middle of my fucking sentence.
We're talking about Freire and dialogue and like what it really means to be intelligent.
Oh yes, thank you. Yeah, I don't think that's gonna help me out actually.
I'm sorry.
That might have been too. No, it just might have been too vague for me. At any rate. Oh yeah, because Corey was talking about how, for those of you who don't know, Dr. Olson. I call him Corey because like I pretend I know him. But Dr. Olson was talking about how he perceived teaching up until he founded. I just listened to this episode today about how he perceived education and the way to teach people until he founded his own university, Signum. And it's a really, really, really cool conversation. The episode's only just slightly under an hour. And Elise at the very beginning of the episode talks about how like she intended for the interview to go longer, but life happened. But there is a second episode, and I would encourage everybody to go listen to the way Corey and Elise talk about teaching people and how you learn, because it's really interesting, especially for people who like, if you like Lord of the Rings and like specifically if you like dig Gandalf and Elrond, like you should like look into, and you dig podcasts, you should look into people like Corey Olson, Dr. Corey Olson, Elise, Kelly from the middle page. They're all very, 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 very intelligent people who are very good at explaining their thought processes. Voices of Arda too, which David and I have both been on, and because like everyone just wants everyone else to learn and to learn together. And that's one of my favorite things about this community is nobody's doing anything alone.
That's critical pedagogy, baby.
I learned what that word is 2 weeks ago when I started listening to Teaching with Magic, because Elise, who was on my podcast, I released that episode, and she reached out and said, "Thank you for letting me be on." And I was like, "I'm actually about to listen to your podcast." And then I listened to the first episode, and I emailed her, and I was like, "Hey, the fuck is pedagogy mean?" She goes, "Oh, that's just the art of teaching." Oh, okay, cool. Do I need to know any other words?
And framework of teaching. That's it.
Yeah.
So like when something's a pedagogy of blank, like that's the practice, like the what it's rooted in, what this teaching approach is rooted in. So like pedagogy of the press or critical pedagogy, it's rooted in like creating a critical understanding of the world through dialogue and emancipation of like humanity.
Yeah. Before we go, is there anything else you wanted to bring up as far as like the Gil-Galad thing?
We're gonna have to do another episode.
Wait, I did have a piece to add to talking about.
I asked,
because I did want to touch upon Ulmo, kind of going back to the whole aspect of the half elven, because Ulmo does know, and Ulmo is alone of the Valar who's wise enough to say, "Don't bring them elves here. Don't be bringing them elves here."
Because he has that piece of Melkor inside of him from Ose.
Well, because he's in tune with the music of the Ainur. I would say that he's more in tune with the music of the Ainur. And then when you think about how you're talking about change, the most constant thing or the most consistent, or probably one of the more consistent changing things would probably be the ways and the motions of water and the sea and the ocean, starting from, and especially when you get to, especially when you get with, that whole bit about in the Ainulindale with how through the catalyst of Melkor, with Ulmo, the domain of Ulmo and Manwë basically allows for the rivers basically to come to fruition, and like the watershed from the mountains and all that. Yeah. So I think there's that aspect, because he also has the foresight and insight to tell Tutakano, "Hey, you need to leave your armor behind here, because I'm telling you, these are like, you're not only going to create the safe haven, like the prophetic aspect of Ulmo, which is so much depth and different, like real world, like stories and religion mythologies that I very much see in it. But it's in that, like, you have from that very aspect that he kind of knows that there's going to be a union between elves and men. I mean, we get aspects of that in the Artiketier to Atherbeth, as far as Vinderato.
Oh, damn it. He did it. He did it.
That was one we haven't mentioned yet.
I'm out of wine, so I'm going to drink water.
Oh, wow, rude.
I guess I gotta drink water also.
Now I got to drink more for you.
Oh my goodness, no. But no, I think that, like, to your point with like Ulmo, I've just had like a brain blast, like because you also mentioned shamanism and like this, and I was also talking about like with Elrond, like being in the Borderlands. You have Ose, who is like one of the known Maiar of Ulmo, and who is like essentially the other half of, I can never pronounce her name.
Weenen.
He leaves the Valar, but he comes back. He crosses the hedge between two worlds. And I think that's why Ulmo is also so,
and he never stops wavering technically.
Yes, he's constantly, he's the one who's able to cross the hedge.
Just like the tides.
Death and life. Yes. Yeah, between like death and life, and like chaos and order, cycles and just like unrepentant change. So I think that like oftentimes, like historically, when we look at characters who are seen as like being like the ones who are able to like bring back new knowledge, they usually die at some point, right? They cross the hedge, and like historically, like people who are like considered, and I feel like shamanism is like such a like loaded term, but I don't know what other term anthropologically to use, but like in the sense that like you enter into an altered state in order to properly like commune with the divine. Altered state of consciousness to cross to another side and then bring back that knowledge to the people. Like I think that Ose is like that's why Ulmo is so much better able to understand the children of Arda because he brings that experience from Melkor.
See, I always
that transformation within Ulmo.
I always I always felt that given that we're all made up of mostly water, that was like a subconscious reason why Tolkien made Ulmo like basically like the second most powerful Vala.
Where are the children of Ilúvatar born out of? Or where do they awaken from too?
Right, the waters of Cuivianen.
And Holdordian, yeah.
And, well, I think also like if you look at like mythology and fairy stories and all of these like archetypes that Tolkien would draw on, that is like, you know, this idea of like water as like a like portal, right? So like baptism. Or you have characters who drown like Beowulf, right? Like he has to dive under to fight, is it Grendel?
Yeah.
Like, essentially like this like large pools of water as being like a portal to the underworld and also a way to return. So I think that like really, you know, the mysteries, oh my, there's so like, I think that once you really start to like contemplate the nature of the Valar and not just see them as like, I think oftentimes people see them as kind of like almost like the Greek gods in like the Hercules movie or in like the Percy Jackson books, right? Instead of like seeing them like as like mystical, like I think we really demystify them.
Yeah.
And like seeing them as like
100%, you know, absolutely.
Taking like a really like mystical and like a mystery religion is like what they often call it, like approach to understanding the Valar and like seeing them past like, you know, these like very simplified constructions. Like I think there's so much.
Look at how the trees are created. Like there's no way that's not just like people like wearing robes. Like there's a woman who's fucking weeping the whole time. There's a woman who like is somehow really good at gardening, and then there's a woman who like can like control the very fucking light of the universe.
Yeah, and they're all
to create like it takes those three insanely strong women to create these two trees that are so bright that it fucking brightens up or lights up a whole fucking continent. Besides like Avatar.
Yeah, no, it's I think that we might not have unlocked the mystery of Gil-Galad's origins, but maybe we unlocked the mystery of, you know, the nature of Ilúvatar.
Well, that's my favorite thing about doing this podcast is that I will have guests on who have an idea of what they want to talk about, and by the end we're talking about something completely different. Because they're in Tolkien's Legendarium, every single nook and cranny should be explored, especially when it comes to languages, because through the language, like we talked about at the very beginning, and as David so eloquently pointed out, and Bree helped out with it, was I'm just saying it that way because I can't remember exactly how it happened. I've had some drinks,
just something,
just a couple, but through the scholarship of David and Bree, we pointed out, they pointed out some very interesting parallels to why Bree initially brought this Gil-Galad argument to the table. And of course, with, you know, as nerds do, who happen to all be neurodivergent at all times, we just kept going tangent down tangent until we ended up where the episode ended. And so I just wanted to like remind everyone where we started with Bree's really, really, really good conspiracy theories, which there are at the very least 3 that I think are top of the list at the moment. And then we just kind of devolve from there because we're friends and we're just like joking around talking with each other. Yeah.
I do like those theories. Those are actually really...
Oh my god, they're so fucking good.
You know what,
some of those are fucking good.
When we meet up, we should each come forward with our favorite theory and then try to convince the group of our Gil-Galad theory. Everyone can bring their favorite pet theory, do a presentation, laying down our argument, and then as a group we decide. I think that would be a really fun game.
That is a cool idea.
Yeah.
It's a really cool
idea. Because
actually,
come to think of it, like at the sacking of Narla Rondo, were there any survivors outside of like Turin?
right?
No. We don't know.
So that likely means that there were like texts and tomes and genealogies and censuses to account for the people in the kingdom there. So who's to say somebody couldn't come and write their name and so was born
Gil-Galad
or someone else's name?
I
don't know. We fucking wrapped it back together.
Yeah, so
I do really like that he's just some random elf he stumbled upon.
Yeah.
That actually is my new headcanon.
Gil-Galad, son of some guy. That's it. That's my theory. That and then like a council of like Artanis, Círdan, Idril, Tuor, they all came together and they were like, we need to figure this shit out. I don't want.
From now on, we should call him. From now on, he is Gil Montecristo.
The Count of Gil-Galad. Okay.
All right. Well, for now, Almien, the Noldor squad will return. But Almien, everyone, thank you for joining us.
Mm-hmm.
Did I not fucking? Wait.
That's why I was like, wait, are you?
Because we were doing the gang signs, so that's why. Wait, is it reversed this time?
Hold on, David. Hold on. I gotta find out. Oh, well, I won't know until tomorrow morning. I swear to God, this was recording.
No, it wasn't recording because it just said recording in progress.
Well, I guess we got to do this next weekend.
We'll do it again.
I'll find out how much I have, and we'll go from there. Damn it. Well.
Oh no.
I'll have to come up with.
I should do one more shot, right?
No more. Drink some water.
It's a half a shot. Let's go
for this episode of Tolkien on Tap. Thank you for listening. Be sure to like and subscribe and follow me on any of my social medias. I'm on Threads, Instagram, Blue Sky, and TikTok at @the_Neej. Namarie.